Welcome to Keep Trucking Personal, where we invite you to explore the heart and soul of our company, Kivi Brothers Trucking. Through engaging storytelling, insightful market updates, and vibrant energy, our podcast reflects our culture, values, and achievements. Whether you're a team member or industry enthusiast, join us to build connections, foster growth, and inspire excellence. Discover why we're more than just a company. We're a community, a catalyst for positive change, and a home for those aspiring to be part of something extraordinary. The pre-trip is complete and engines ready. We're set to hit the road on the Keep Trucking Personal podcast. Let's go.
Welcome back to Keep Trucking Personal. My name is Tyler Kivi, and I'm your host. Today's guest is someone very special to Kivi Brothers Trucking. He's actually been here longer than I have, and I have a lot to ask him. So, Dave, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And Dave, I should probably include some of your titles here because you've done a lot. You started with a professional driver. You came into the office, and you and I work side by side getting operations going. You're now our Director of Flatbed Operations. Just tell us a little bit about yourself before you got into trucking. I have all kinds of things to ask about when you were here. So tell us about your growing up, how you got into trucking. I know your dad drove. Fire away.
I grew up, my mom and dad trucked together before I was born. And so, I mean, I never had a chance to do anything else. It was just what I wanted to do from the time I can remember. Trucking has always been a huge part of my life. I grew up riding in trucks every summer, every Christmas break I could. It never stopped. My parents tried to get me not to get into trucking. And I tried to go to school for art. I was always big into painting and photography. And I just couldn't get away from it. All I did was going to and from school is looking at trucks going, oh, that's what I want to do.
So your story kind of sounds like Derek. You guys, when there was any time off, you were out trucking, like literally.
Absolutely. I cried if my dad didn't take me, if I had an extra day off of school and he wouldn't be back in time. I was just heartbroken that I couldn't go.
And that was in New Mexico, right? Is that where this was?
Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was born and raised in Albuquerque.
And how long did you live there?
I lived there till I graduated high school. And as soon as I graduated, I moved to Phoenix. Went to Mesa Community College for a few years, hauled equipment around Phoenix, moved to LA for a few months, realized I could not afford to live in LA, moved back to Phoenix and hauled equipment again, and then moved to Minnesota when I was 20 years old and started driving truck full-time shortly after that.
So you were a company driver when you were moving equipment or hauling equipment?
Yeah, when I was in Phoenix, I hauled equipment for a company called Valley Rentals, which is very similar. A lot of people would know, like United Rentals, commercial construction equipment. And we hauled loaders and skid steers and just to different job sites and stuff around Phoenix. And, Phoenix has always been a growing like crazy community. So there was always stuff to do. We'd start at 3-4 in the morning and be done 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon.
So did you have your license right or get your CDL right when you were 18?
Yes.
Yeah. Like the day you turned 18?
You did not have to have a CDL still. It just started after I got my chauffeur's license, I guess you would call.
Okay.
It's I just got that. That was only for interstate Arizona. I could not drive any other state than Arizona because I was under 21 and that killed me,
Mm-hmm.
I could go right to California and then I had to come back.
I remember when I got my CDL. So before I turned 18, I went and took, I can't remember, it's either right at 18 or right. Nonetheless, I went and took the test to make sure that you can, the written test, I guess you call it, and then the driving test. But I remember Derek, he's like, you're 18, that's happening now. Like you're not buying anymore. Like we have freight to move, we have things to load. And that it was just kind of funny because him. It's not like, well, just get it on the calendar in the coming weeks here. No, you need to get your license now because things have to get moving.
Just go.
Yeah. Kind of funny. When you grow up and do it, a lot of it's just, you don't have a choice. You're expected to have this, get it done. So when you moved to Minnesota 20, when did you get your own truck? Because what I want to ask after that is tell me about those trucks, because there's a lot to unpack.
So I drove for a company out of Deerwood for a short time. The owner and I couldn't see eye to eye. To him, trucks were just tools, and that was it. I liked nice trucks, and it was time for me. So I went out on my own and bought a truck, leased onto a guy that just wasn't really working out real well. And I had seen Kivi trucks running around hauling pipe, and they had nice equipment. And I happened to park at the time. I parked my truck down at Arrowhead, the old truck stop in Duluth. And I walking down the hall, I bumped into Lowboy, your Uncle Greg.
Yeah.
And from that point forward, it was all over.
And we talked about Greg with Derek, but so is he the one that I guess you would say recruited you? Like you bumped into him and he's like, hey, we need you.
Yeah. Greg hired me a few months after I was hired. I found out from Mark that I was too young to be leased on. And he said, well, figure out, I guess, what we got to do. And because I had just turned 22, where I was just about to turn 22, and they weren't supposed to have anybody under 24. And here I was.
Yeah. So every business has to have that risk taker, I guess you could say. And Greg was that. He would sign you up. Like I said earlier, he would get you into a project that could have been way larger than you can handle. And he had to finish because he got you into it. The most common person would probably be like, that's not for us. And where he was a little more risk takey, you could say.
Absolutely.
That's funny.
We gambled on a lot of things with him, and we won a lot.
So then having your own truck, like what was your first truck?
My first truck was a 1989 379 extended hood, 63-inch flat top, 4.25 cat, 18 speed.
You sound like you remember this like it was yesterday.
Oh, absolutely.
Is it in one of the pictures in the background that I see right now?
No, it would be on the other wall. It's the blue and white striped one.
And that's one of my things, like growing up, and I'm serious when I said that you were here longer than I am. Growing up was you were the guy with the truck that was custom. Like many people had nice trucks. We had nice trucks and we worked hard to keep them clean and make sure they looked nice for customers. But you had a different appearance. Like yours was custom orange cab over with a matching reefer. And I guess I should highlight that you didn't even pull flatbed, which is our book of business now. You were a reefer puller.
Yeah, I pulled a reefer for about 13 years. Had my own customers for the most part. Jeff would load me back off the East Coast weekly, and I hauled potatoes and meat and whatever else I could load to the East Coast, and went out there every week, around 50 to 52 rounds a year.
Wow. And when you're saying East Coast, you're not talking about just like the East Coast. You're talking like Bronx, Brooklyn,
Queens,
boroughs. Yeah.
It was New York City or Philadelphia pretty much every week.
Well, we'll get into that soon because I have a lot of questions asked there too, which is funny because that area scares most people because it's such a challenge. And for you, it was an every week occurrence which is very unique. I mean, I'm excited to hear that. So you've had many custom trucks. How many?
I think 12 that I've had licensed. I've had a few others that just I've owned and never really licensed and driven, but I've had 3 different cab overs on the road, all Peterbilts. Everything has been Peterbilt except for one Kenworth. And I had that for about 6 or 8 months. It was a really nice truck. And I ended up selling that to a friend of mine to buy a 79 359.
So like there's an invitational, or what was it that Peterbilt had that you got invited to? Because that's one of the things that I was, and I still am very proud of, when we had a company truck that had our logo on it at a Peterbilt invite. Tell us about that.
Every year Peterbilt has an open house, and what they do is they kind of get the company picnic, their annual picnic, and then they invite certain truck owners in to bring their trucks and basically kind of put on a small Peterbilt only truck show. And I was fortunate enough to go to it 3 different times.
They put you in their calendar and everything, right?
Yep. They have a book that comes out after it that my trucks have been in, and I've been in a few books on a few calendars. And yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. I'm pretty proud of the trucks I've had.
Is that kind of like the pinnacle, being invited to that, or is there other truck shows that have given you more?
No, to me, that's kind of the pinnacle. I mean, you're literally picked out of a handful of people, and to actually get invited 3 different times was really, really awesome.
I was talking with Alex a few episodes back, and he was saying when he's at a truck stop and he's got big equipment on or a large load, a lot of people are like attracted asking questions and this and that. And that's just on the freight that he's hauling. Now, when you come in with a custom truck, that's like I said, it's not something that you see every day. These are like you're rubbernecking when you see it. Did you ever get tired of everyone? Like, can I jump up in there and take a look? Can I?
Oh, there was many days. In the one of the funniest was my wife. She'd always get mad at me because I'd be coming home or whatever, and she'd be like, "Well, what took you so long to get home?" Well, I had to stop and get fuel. And she's with me one day, and some guy comes over. He's like, "Man," and starts talking to me about my truck. She's like, "No wonder you can't get anywhere. It takes you 2 hours to get fuel because you have to explain everything to everybody that comes and talks to you." So there was times that it did get very, I gotta go, and you'd end up wasting way more time than you really wanted to.
Your wife probably had a love-hate relationship with every truck you had, because when you think of just that experience, when you got home, you had to put how much work into it to keep it in that condition. Like, they're not just pretty all the time. Like, you're doing a lot of work, polishing, making sure painting's done. Like,
absolutely. And a lot of my trucks were old. I mean, I drove trucks from this in the 70s and early 80s that, I was running into the early 2000s. So we're talking, 20 plus year old equipment. Stuff breaks. And one thing I've always said is you can't run an old truck because it's affordable. You have to run an old truck because you want to run an old truck, and you have to be able to do some of your own maintenance because you can't afford to pay for it all to be done.
How many had power steering out of those 12?
All of them but one. I only did that once, but I ran that truck for like 5 years into the city all the time.
Probably had forearms like
I look like Popeye.
I believe it, hanging on that big steering wheel trying to, and that was the cab over?
That was the orange cab over, yeah. No power steering and no front brakes, all kinds of fun stuff.
It's definitely a different experience just climbing around that. And that was, when I'm thinking of the orange one, how many years ago was that?
Probably 15.
Even then, like, it was old, but it wasn't as old as it would be now. And looking at all the little custom facets to it, it was like you said, every time, even in our own yard, I saw the thing often, and I still would come up there and be like, I got to walk around this again and kind of just take it in.
The biggest, the cool factor on that thing is I had a beer keg for my air cleaner, and that got a lot of attention.
Yeah, definitely did. That stood out. When you think back to like being that guy driving those old trucks, is that a different like mindset that you had on how you did your day, how everything went? Like, did you plan your trips differently because you knew I have to be extra careful? I don't want to scratch this thing. Like, it's like a Ferrari. You treated it like that. Like, how did you plan your days?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you always had to you wanted the parking spot that you had a lot less chance of getting hit, because you couldn't find parts for, a 77 P cab over. They weren't readily available. They're still not. And so you really thought about where you parked. A lot of guys I know have issues finding parking later in the evening. And now you add an extra where you want a parking spot that you're not going to get backed into or anything like that. So you definitely have to plan ahead and kind of learn the mom and pop places where you can hide in the back corner and things like that.
So how long did you do reefer before you switched to flatbed? I can't put a date on it.
It was about 13 years. So I pulled a flatbed when I first came on for a few years, and then I ended up with my reefer, pulled that for about 13 years. And then my number one customer, things kind of got a little weird and freight kind of dropped off with him. So then I just finally one day I was like, you know what? I work for a flatbed company. I'm just going to go pull a flatbed and start going to California.
Completely changed the opposite side of the country. You were going to New York City every week, and then your desired destination turned into LA.
Yep.
Which was, as we were growing, those were the two hardest places when I think of freight opportunities. A driver, hey, what do you have? What's heading out? Oh, we have a load going to Newark. Nah, I have to think about that. or I have a load to LA, and they would be the same kind of like, really, like nothing down to Texas or.
Yeah. And I was like, all right, which way, whichever one, let's go.
And that's kind of how it was. I literally dispatching as when I would be dispatching for you, it was kind of like, well, it's not close enough to LA, or, I'll go this way, but how can we get to LA? It was funny because that's when sometimes it was hard. The places you avoid when somebody wants it, then you think it would be easy to find that freight lane. And you're like, okay, I'm working on it. I'll give you a minute. Like we'll get something put together. And I kind of cut my teeth on dispatching with you as well. So we
absolutely
flipped the whole coin over. I watched you as I was growing up, saw your trucks, then got into the shop. Never really worked on your truck because you did, like you said, all your own maintenance, or you had kind of your own process there, you could say.
You and Derek and Dakota spent plenty of time washing them, though.
Yeah. You definitely let us wash them. That's about the extent. I don't think I ever got to drive any of your trucks. There wasn't any like jump in it and go. You were.
I think Derek might have gotten to drive one of mine once, or he just rode with me. I can't remember. I didn't trust many people to drive my stuff.
And then you fast forward to, I think it was Derek and I that called you together, but maybe it was Derek by himself when we were trying to convince you, okay, we're trying to grow this company and we want your knowledge, because what you had displayed was a lot of that LTL depth. And that's something that we wanted to grow. Like, how do you consolidate freight and how do you do this? And then you did it. And you made it easy to say, like, we need that experience. Plus, if somebody's comfortable going to the hard areas of the country that everybody else isn't, you can help them. And you still do to this day. I literally refer your name all the time when it's like, we're going to the Long Island. We'll call Dave White. He can walk you through that with his eyes closed. And that's a big factor for us for getting this freight done, is if you don't have that person that can explain it or understand, or, hey, give that confidence to somebody that's never done it, it's nerve-wracking. And that's why we needed your experience. What was it coming out of a truck and going into an office? Something that you love and you still do because you have a hobby truck that you wrench on and tinker on, and going into an office.
I mean, it's still I've been in the office now for, I think, coming up on 9 years. And I don't know. I'm still like trying to get my feet wet. I don't, I still feel like I'm still part truck driver. And I understand, a lot of the guys and a lot of the drivers they have a bad day, call me. And, I've spent so much time in some of these horrible places. And when I say horrible places, I don't even mean cities. I just mean bad receivers, places that drivers don't get treated well. So I think they do appreciate that. And they know they can turn to me, and I'm understanding, that not everything goes great, and you got to keep your cool and, try to convey that to them. And it seems to be helpful.
Oh, most definitely. Like I literally refer to you just on my own thoughts. I'm like, how is this going to work? Hey, I'll call you. How long does this take to get through this part of New York, or going into California, because California is so tricky with weights and, closing your trailer axles and how to manage and load, because you've done all that. And
right.
And then tying in all of your experience with fixing stuff. I mean, how many times have you kind of been a road technician over the phone? Like, okay, we have to do this to get you to a repair shop. So
yeah, Fleet will reach out to me in certain locations because they know I have connections in different places, and it's definitely fun. And it, and it's kind of cool to have a connection with a lot of the people I've dealt with over all the years, and, call and be like, hey, we got this truck we need some help with, and to actually be able to pull something off, rather quickly. We had a driver out in the middle of New Mexico, and I'm like, I'll call my cousin. My cousin went out and fixed it for us so the guy could get rolling.
It's a relationship-driven industry.
Absolutely.
No matter how much technology comes in, it's still about who you know and how you've treated that company or person, and it goes a long ways. And yeah, you're a testament to that. Like, I have connections in LA that you have. When's the last time you trucked to LA? 10 years now, you're saying?
Yeah, at least 10 years now.
And you still have people you call on the regular, like, hey, can you help me out with this? Yeah.
If they don't know something, they know somebody that knows something. So it's always helpful.
So do you have any tips or ideas that can help people become confident in going to, let's just focus on the Long Island area, one of the hardest, because it is definitely more challenging when you think of space. Like there's no doubt. Everything is condensed. Some of the 2-lane streets are actually 1 lane because there's cars on each side. What helps somebody be successful going there?
The biggest thing I think that people need to understand is that city is no different than, say, Minneapolis here, Louisville, Kentucky. It's so many people, and it's just so intimidating. I mean, I won't deny, even after I'd been doing it for years, you cross the GW Bridge going into the Bronx on a Sunday night when everybody's coming back from the Poconos. I mean, I have pictures of crawling across the GW, and it can be overwhelming. And you just got to remember, you know what? If something happens, as long as you're being diligent, paying attention to where you're going, there's nothing you can't get out of. I've been lost many a times. I've never been so lost that I can't get my way out of it. Sometimes it's pretty frustrating and pretty, middle of the night, you're like, oh no, what am I going to do? You just got to keep your cool and not get panicked.
Yeah. So being prepared, it also helps. And that's where, to keep tying you back in, like having that person in your corner, like, hey, I'm coming over the GW, and he helped me walk through this. And fortunately for New York City, it's so congested, those roads ain't changing. So the roads probably are the exact same exits, the exact same highways, nothing, it's not like where you said Phoenix is kind of emerging and still is. And there's new highways around the city and this and that being created. New York's pretty.
I just had one the other day talking to a friend of mine, and he was telling me, he's like, yeah, I took this road in Phoenix. And I'm like, oh, it's a new freeway wasn't even a road when I lived out there. So
yeah, that's not happening in New York.
No,
they're pretty stuck in their ways.
The really tough part with like New York City is a lot of the people, even if you call a location for directions, a lot of those people live and work within a 6-block radius. Half the time they can't get you to their location. If you can get close, they can get you there, but you got to get yourself within a few blocks, and then they can tell you how to get in there. But the biggest thing that I always had that helped was Thompson guides. I had a Thompson guide for New York, LA, Chicago. And I know it's archaic and old, but man, those maps, page by page, block by block, you can make yourself a route.
And what happens now is when somebody punches in a destination in their GPS, a lot of these GPSs are advanced. So they take into consideration congestion. And when your road is blocked because there's an accident, it reroutes you. And you may not even be aware that it changed 3 different highways ahead of you. And now all of a sudden you can get into a sticky situation where when you're using an atlas or a very detailed picture of New York, what you're taking, whether there's traffic in front of you or not. You stick to the plan, and that's how you get through it successfully. I think the GPS can be kind of a hindrance if you're not aware of your surroundings going into there.
Absolutely. I mean, a GPS is probably one of the greatest inventions we've ever had. But it can also, there has to be some common sense use behind it. And to me, you should always have at least an atlas in your truck in case your GPS doesn't work. And I used to kind of play games going, from here to LA or from here, when I did get a random load to the Southeast, I'd play games with Google Maps or GPS and be like, I can get there faster for less miles. And I could usually find myself a better way than what it said. So
Chicago and many of the eastern cities are known for low bridges. How did you manage that? Is it just you got to know the area so well, or did you ever get into a pickle where you're like, I'm backing out of this?
I had to back out of a couple of streets. I luckily never, knock on wood, never got into a really bad situation. I never damaged anything, but yeah, I definitely had to back down a few streets. And I know I put myself into a traffic circle in southern New Jersey that I really shouldn't have been in, and had to back around that. And yeah, there was a few times that those embarrassing moments you don't really talk about too much. We've all been there. And if you haven't been driving very long.
Yeah. I think the GPS gets you in one of those situations faster. It happened. I'm trying to think where I was going, and I had the GPS set and it rerouted just on traffic. And I was like, like you start to realize right away when you're getting off an exit, like, no, this is, and it was
Something
doing,
not right.
yeah, it was starting. And then I'd get back on the freeway and recalibrate myself because I was just letting it tell me where to go. And that's like you said, you got to kind of, no, this, I'm still captain of this truck. Like I'm going to make sure I know where it's going.
Right.
You can, even in any little rural area, you can get stuck. You can get caught up on a road with a weight limit that you're not supposed to be on. It doesn't matter where you're going.
We have that one road going to your terminal there in Kentucky. What is it? 151 that,
Yep.
We've had a handful of trucks and I guarantee it's GPS related.
Yeah. Well, and there's a sign. It's kind of a tricky sign. It tries to tell you if you're over this length, you're not allowed on the highway.
Right.
So there's no weight restrictions. You're not damaging the road, but they have a length restriction. And yeah, but there's a big sign, probably a 4x8, and it's easy to miss. But yeah, the GPS slaps you on there. And I think that guy, he hits his quota daily by probably 10 o'clock because it's just where all the trucks get running.
Yep. And it's easy to do. I mean, you've got a lot going on. You're trying to pay attention, especially traffic. And I think the last time I was down there, there's some construction right there at the top of that. So you're paying attention to what's going on around you. It's easy to miss a sign like that. And unfortunately, you can end up with a ticket. Downtown Minneapolis, 52, or St. Paul. I did the same thing. Went the way I went many, many times, and they had a length restriction during construction. And sure enough, I got a $165 ticket for, going through there after they put that into effect. And
you couldn't get them to look at the truck and say, "Hey, this is a magical piece of art.
I'm super cool. Come on, officer, let me go."
Let's take a look at this beer keg on the side for my air tank, and let's talk. So you did that. We convinced you to come in the office. Like you said, there's a bit of a culture shock. Probably the hardest was just getting used to systems and tools, right? Not so much knowing where the freight was. And it was
absolutely. I remember the first email you guys, you guys set me up on my email, and somebody sent an email and I went to reply, and they're like, "Dude, you replied to us, not to the customer." Just really bad. Like, oh, I guess I really don't know anything about computers.
And even from your start to where we are now, like I've been on the same ride, that the systems have upgraded and continue to evolve and get much more technical. Sometimes they are getting easier to use, fortunately. Like the more advanced we get now, the easier they're getting used, but there's still so many nuances and little puts and takes that you have to incorporate to make it run as it should.
They've gotten so much easier to use than they were. I can't remember what that first system we had. It was horrible. It was awful, that first system, when I came in the office. And then we got another one that was a lot easier, but we were just growing faster than it could grow with us. And now with TMW now, it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah, there's some changes and some challenges with certain things, but they're just like anything, you just have to take your time and walk through it.
Yeah. So then you were in Duluth, right? This is all in the beginning of Duluth. And then we opened the Blaine terminal, and you championed that and still are there.
Yes.
So you kind of took on some big undertakings, right? Moving out of a truck, coming into an office. Okay, I've got this under control. And then now running a terminal. How was that?
That was definitely interesting. We had kind of talked about it, and I'm like, yeah, I'll go. It's fine. And walking in the office, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're supposed to be in Blaine today." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And came down here. I had an old wobbly bench and an old college desk for probably 3 or 4 months. I was scared it was going to collapse with the computer on it, and started growing that, and we were doing containers and all kind. I mean, it was just a lot of long days, but we had a lot of fun.
Well, so you've done that, and then you become an experienced forklift operator, like you said.
Absolutely.
You can pick a quarter out of a guy's pocket with one of those things, because some of those container loads are tight. They're not easy to unload.
Yeah, and stuff has tipped over, and it's
a long journey away from China.
Yeah, and we've done nothing but grow that side, and it's gotten bigger and bigger, and now we have a full-time yard guy. And
yeah, it's crazy how it grows. And then continue moving forward now, Director of Operations on the flatbed side, which not only now you're looking at what was just the Blaine terminal, maybe a little more focused. Now everyone, like your umbrella's just gotten that much bigger.
It's been really exciting. It's quite a bit challenging. You don't realize how much goes into it, and we're trying to come up with some safety policies and just streamline our operations, and some of it's just been easy to do, and just, you see simple fixes. Some of it's been really challenging too. And we're still addressing a lot of those things, and we're still improving every day. We will obviously get some safety programs installed and follow through with some of that stuff that we just kind of always was on the back burner for us. And we really have changed our focus on being a safety culture.
Yeah.
And that's been really important.
It takes time. There's no handbook written that says this is what you do. There's a lot of best practices, but the more I collaborate and speak with, whether it's a different carrier or somebody that has that best practice advice, every trucking company is so different. And many people think, of culture, and they kind of start to just be like, well, there's no easy way to measure culture. Sometimes you can't see it but you can feel it. And when you get into that culture talk, and I remember younger seeing companies grow, and you're like, well, and they always use those words, culture, vision, and mission statement and this, and you're kind of like, well, how does that play in? And now when you get to this level and you start to see like your culture is what changes. And like you said, we are now focused on safety and being the best on the road and delivering the best output. And it's taken a long time to build that culture, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of people, takes a lot of head down work. There's no flip a switch and here it is. And yeah, it's exciting to say that I can feel it, even though you can't see it.
It's been really cool. This move to Motive has been a game changer for everyone, and all for the better. The operation of it for the drivers, us being able to see, we've all been there where people that, you always had a customer calls, hey, where's my truck? And you're like, well, the last time it pinged was an hour ago. So he should be there, but if he stopped for breakfast, yeah, you might see him. Where now we can literally see live, and it, hey, the truck is rolling 55 miles an hour, should be there in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. The legacy platforms we had were not revolutionary. That's for sure. And, and when you think of the driver's side, Motive has allowed us to connect so much with everyone. Like, it's one platform that does almost everything except dispatching and invoicing. And if it could, we'd be on that, because it's so easy and it makes the drivers in the know. It keeps our customers in the know, and it helps operations be proactive. One of the most unique things that I think Motive is working towards, and this is something that's going to be towards the end of the year, when you think of response time, right? And I've said this before, and I think I said it with I don't remember which guest, but we were talking about, like, you're in an accident, you're in a rural area, you're somewhere, and you get in an accident with people that we can't assist you. And so people that's gone, and now we're in Motive, we can assist you very fast. Well, now Motive also has that emergency side. If you're in a bad wreck or in an unfortunate situation, they can assist if it's at 3 a.m. and we're not even available, to help get authorities or help get somebody there to potentially save multiple people's lives if it's that type of, situation. And That's just things you don't think of, but those are game changers in us taking that culture of safety and growing it. Like, we're here to commit not only to our vehicle and our driver, but anyone around us to being safer and having a better experience.
Absolutely. And one thing I find with Motive is, every time I think I know and everything that it does, you find something else that you're like, oh, hey, look, it does this too. Great. It gives us ETAs when the truck should arrive. There's just so many benefits. I feel like we're in a Motive commercial now.
Yeah. I'm going to have to talk to them, say, hey, get Dave. He's got you guys selling.
It's so impressive. It just all the, and I drove a Motive truck. I did end up, unfortunately, with one violation, but it was the first time I had driven one. I was pretty proud of the fact I only ended up with one.
Yeah.
1,000 miles and
one violation. Kind of tell our story with Motive is it's about learning to get better. This isn't like you learned what you did wrong or what you can do better.
Absolutely.
just on that experience. And it wasn't through an ear beaten, or it wasn't through this. It was like self accountability and the transparency. Yeah, it's second to none. It's amazing. Yeah.
No, I'm excited to see where we go. We have a lot of things to gain and move forward with, but we're also, for the most part, kind of family. And, it's the kind of comes back to the whole keep trucking personal. I used to tease Derek all the time, about missing a spot on washing my truck. And, I love when people are, oh, how did you get started with Kivis? I'm like, I tell my story, and then they'll ask me about you guys or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, they're all right truck washers. They did all right. And, most people get a pretty good chuckle out of that.
I bet. Like I said, it's from when I can remember first trucking, you were there, and you've been with my dad, Jeff, like you guys go back with stories. And when it comes to, once again, challenging situations, hey, how do we get this resolved? What do we do here? I've seen and heard several times you guys collaborating, like, okay, let me tell your dad, let's get some knowledge on the phone here, and let's understand what we're up against. Not long after a resolution comes out of that.
And I love, like, when Jeff and I work on partials or whatever, and oh, this guy's got, and I'm like, send me a picture of the load, we'll figure it out. It's like a Tetris game. You just have to get it all put together and it'll fit.
Yeah, definitely. Well, now that you're director of operations, especially on the flatbed side, like, how do you feel the market, and where do you see that going?
As everybody knows, the market's soft right now. We're in unprecedented territories right now. It's, with interest rates and everything. And I feel, unfortunately, it's probably going to be soft into the summer. I'm really hoping that obviously summer will pick up like it always does in this industry. You always have some construction, no matter what it is. We're fortunate to have some customers that don't seem to be affected too much by, recession type. I don't feel like we're in a recession, but I'm really hoping to see a pickup here in the next few weeks. It's tough up here in Minnesota because we are having really nice weather, but we still have road bans on in northern Minnesota. They should be coming off, I think, here next week. And that's when construction and stuff up here will start picking up more. And
yeah, well, like you said, a lot of that construction industry really cranks up. And fortunately for us, we're very close with many of those customers. So we can expect an increase here coming into the summer. But yeah, man, the market has been something else for the last year and a half.
Yeah, it's been so up and down. I mean, we can watch it by weeks.
Yeah.
1 week does really well, and the next week you're like, oh right, we're oh no, okay, now nope, it wasn't so great this week, and it's amazing at how quickly you can see it fluctuating.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of ties back to our principle, just like you were saying, safety. No matter what the market's doing, we are going to excel at safety. Like, one of the things we're going to win at, and one of the things that we're going to persevere at, is having a top-notch company that takes care of its drivers and takes care of the customers and takes care of anyone around it. And that's exciting to see top down, side to side. And we see the data and starting to make data-driven decisions on how to perform better. And that's something that I'm passionate about. And I know I just can't wait to see where we go with that.
It's really cool how we're able to see how our decisions are affected over the big picture, where we might see, hey, we deadheaded this truck a little extra far, and realize that wasn't the right decision. And that's where all this data is really important, because a lot of what we do is on gut instinct. And unfortunately, sometimes our gut is wrong. We're all pretty good at what we do, but still once in a while, you make a decision with your heart, not your brain. And you think you're doing the right thing, but then in hindsight, you're like, yeah, maybe not the best decision. And the fact that we're learning and growing from that, which obviously will improve drivers financially and mentally, those are all things that will help us in the long term.
Absolutely. So we've talked about a lot. What is the most memorable trip that you have, or trips? Like, let's hear what, I know you already said New York and California, but let's hear what you talk about whenever someone asks.
Probably one of the most fun trips I've had was a load I think you booked, actually. It was the Paul McCartney stage leaving here at the Target field. And Cool and I, old Larry, he and I loaded the Paul McCartney stage going to LA, delivered to Dodger Stadium, which was cool in and of itself. But it was also the first time that Paul McCartney had been back to Dodger Stadium since the Beatles. So that was really cool. And then we went up to San Francisco and loaded the Jay-Z Beyonce stage out of there and took that back to Colorado Springs. And it was just a very memorable trip. And anybody who knew Cool would understand why it was such a memorable trip.
Yeah. He can make you laugh. That's for sure. That driver. Yeah. That's definitely checking a lot of boxes for you, isn't it? Going to LA, going to the Dodger Stadium,
going to AT&T Field in San Francisco.
Yeah. That I remember that one vividly, setting that up, because there's time requirements that have to be hit for that to be successful. They can't put a concert on with half the stage missing. They need every piece of that to be there on time.
No, and it was kind of, I think part of it that was fun for me was, we were getting pushed fairly late, getting loaded on Sunday, loading out. The lead driver for that company was really pushing. You guys got to be there on time. You guys got to be there on time. We were there on time. Their trucks were late. That was a big pat on the back for Larry and I. We were pretty proud of ourselves that we were the first two there.
Got the job done. Well, Dave, give us some advice for a new driver coming in. Like, you've went through every facet of this company. You've done everything. Like, what's going to make a driver successful when they join this company?
The biggest thing is to keep an open mind. Don't look at, because it's not somewhere where you'd normally go. Always be willing to go wherever. It just really opens up the door. It makes everybody's job easier. And generally, we always are trying to put you in a better place for a better load.
Well, the good news is if it's a challenging area, they can call you, right?
Right. And they do. They're not bashful. They will for sure call me. Yeah. And
we're always there to help. And especially
your dad or I always get that phone call. But no, and it is absolutely. That's, I think, the biggest thing is just keeping an open mind and don't limit yourself on. Be willing to tarp, be willing to, whether it's machinery or lumber, it's generally, there's a reason for it. It's not,
it's not personal against somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's still a lot of opportunity, even in this challenged market, like you said, and being flexible and open-minded. That's a shoe-in for success right there. And that's great advice. Well, I definitely appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. I know we're going to have you again as a guest because you have all kinds of stories, or you're going to have insight to the market when that time comes. It's been a pleasure, Dave.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. We'll see you guys later.
Tune in to Keep Trucking Personal next week. The guest that I have has been to Alaska twice while he's been at Kivi, and he has a lot to tell us on those trips. Until then, thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Keep Trucking Personal. We appreciate you taking the time to explore the heart and soul of Kivi Brothers Trucking with us. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to let us know your thoughts. Tune in next time as we continue our journey together, diving deeper into what makes us a community, a catalyst for positive change, and a home for those who aspire to be part of something truly extraordinary. Until then, keep trucking, and we'll catch you on the next episode.